Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Alexandria Society podcast. Today, I'm here with another bonus episode, or a Just the Tangents. This will take the place of what was supposed to be today's episode, because me and Derek's schedules have been off, and then we will be back the week of Christmas for a holiday special, and then after that, we'll go ahead and give you another tangent to enjoy. Instead of taking the end of the year off, we're going to go ahead and send out another one of those after that in June, and then we will be back with another regular episode with our opposite day episode in late January. Hope you enjoy the tangent. Just for the audience's information, this was recorded at the end of the Sky King episode. And without further ado, let's get into the tangents. So would you like to start our King Chronicles, or you want to get into our Lore of the Hammer?
No, go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and do the Stephen King.
Okay. This time for our tangent, I'm going to be reading the Wikipedia page for Pet Sematary to Derek, and their little synopsis of the story. I'm starting off with the book, and then I'm going to read both of the film adaptations.
Man, I don't know what to expect.
I'm genuinely shocked you've never heard of Pet Sematary.
I've heard the name, and I was aware it was
never watched it. I knew you heard of it.
Yeah, I hadn't watched it. I knew it was a movie based on a Stephen, but that was about it. I don't know the plot or anything.
Our main character, Lewis Creed, a doctor from Chicago, is appointed the director of the University of Maine's Campus Health Services. He moves to a house near the town of Ludlow with his wife, Rachel, and their two children, Ellie and Gage. And Ellie's cat, Winston Churchill, who they affectionately call Church.
Oh, nerd.
They have an elderly neighbor called Judd Crandall, and warns them to be wary of the highway, basically. You ever have a small town road that gets sped through by semi trucks?
Yeah. I don't have a specific one in mind, but I'm aware of the concept.
Yeah, so that's what basically they move right in front of there, and they have to worry about pets and their kids getting hit, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
He just basically warns them about speeding trucks. Judd and Lewis become friends, and starts viewing Judd as kind of like a surrogate father.
Okay, yeah.
Judd takes the family on a walk, in the woods. He knows the area, trying to get them familiar with the acreage behind the nearby area, kind of. And he shows that there is a path that leads to a pet cemetery, but it's spelled with an S. This is where the children of the town bury their deceased animals.
So it's like the sign just like a cardboard thing drawn in crayon.
No, I think it's like a wood. No, it's like the older wooden, almost like street signs kind of thing. It's got that kind of vibe.
I'm imagining the S is backwards, like a little kid did it.
I don't remember what it looks like in the movie very well. Victor Pascal, a student who is fatally injured in an auto accident, addresses his dying words to our main character personally, even though they're strangers. On the night following Pascal's death, Lewis dreams that he meets Pascal's ghost, who leads him to the deadfall. Basically leads him behind the pet cemetery, and I don't know why. It's never explained how this random college student who gets killed knows about the secret area behind the cemetery, but basically warns him, hey, don't go up past this area. He wakes up the next morning. You know those dreams or parts of a movie where it implies that the dream may have not actually been a dream, and they have dirt on their feet or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
He wakes up like that. Around Thanksgiving, unfortunately, Church gets run over.
Oh, man. That was my boy.
While they're out of town, whole family, just Rachel and the children, so the wife and the children, went to go to her parents' house.
Yeah.
And he's not sure how he's going to break the news to Ellie. Judge takes him to the cemetery to bury Church, but they don't stop there. It goes basically that area that he was warned about in the dream. That's where Judd takes him.
Oh, don't go there. Don't go to the place you were warned not to go in that ominous dream.
Judd leads Lewis to the real cemetery, which was an ancient burial ground once used by the Mi'kmaq.
How's this?
It's a Native American group. MI'Kmaq.
Micmac.
Okay, sorry, I'm dyslexic. And he buries the cat there on Judd's instruction.
Don't. Oh.
The next afternoon, Church returns home. What used to be a really friendly, warm, lively cat now is ornery and...
Wait, hold on. So he buried the cat?
Yes.
And then it came back?
Yes, alive.
It just showed back at the house.
Yeah. They bury the cat on Judge's instructions, and the next afternoon, Church returns home. What was used to be like a vibrant, lively cat now acts ornery, and in Lewis's words, is a little dead. They play it full up in the movies, I remember. It's not like you know how sometimes pets you can think are passed away, but they're like more stunned, and like a couple days later they come back. They make it clear, like it's happened. So if a pet has been injured or like whatever, but there's not like major signs of physical harm, essentially, sometimes they're just like kind of like paralyzed. That's not the case on this.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. No.
There's been cases of people burying their pets and they show up a couple days later, and it's not like some psychic mysterious thing. It just, they weren't actually dead.
Also, the fact that they come back implies they dig themselves out, which, like,
I think part of it is people not like burying them deep enough, because not a lot of people realize you have to bury things deep before, so they don't like just wash out. So if you don't bury something deep enough, what can happen is either through weather or whatever, it can just become unearthed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Is
I think that's part of it. Like, but also I would hate to bury a pet and come to find out, oh, they weren't dead, but they died because you buried them alive.
Oh God, you know how shitty I would feel if I found out I buried a dog alive.
Yeah, it would fuck with you.
Oh God.
Church starts becoming vicious and hunts mice, birds, and rips them apart without eating them. He also starts smelling rotten, essentially. That's not how it's written, but that's kind of how I interpret it. It says he smells so bad that Ellie no longer wants him in her room at night.
I don't like that.
Judge confirms that Church has been resurrected and that Judge had buried his own dog similarly when he was younger. Lewis, deeply disturbed, begins to wish he had not buried Church. I'm about to hit you hard with the next line, Derek.
Oh no.
Several months later, 2-year-old Gage is killed by a speeding truck.
Oh no. Oh God. Oh.
You know where this is going?
Oh no. Oh, I know exactly where this is going, and I hate every second. Oh no. Oh.
Overcome with despair, Lewis considers bringing his son back to life with the burial ground. Judge attempts to convince him otherwise by telling him the story of Timmy Baterman, the last person that was resurrected by the burial ground. After being killed in World War II, Timmy's body was shipped back to the U.S., and his father buried Timmy in the burial ground. Timmy returned malevolent, terrorizing the people of the town with secrets that Judge asserts that he had no way of knowing. Timmy's father, Bill, stopped him by killing him and setting the house on fire before shooting himself.
Jeez, okay. All right, Steven. All right, what?
I think this was, like, from this story, I'm not sure this is all original, because I think there are folk tales of burial grounds that revive pets and like revive whatever is buried there. I think just the storyline was original to Stephen King.
Yeah. This is just your classic, like. Well, I don't actually know where the trope comes from of like the Indian burial ground.
But it is a trope, right?
Yeah, that is like trope. I think which movie was that? The Exorcist, I think.
I've never seen a lot. I've seen like one of the Exorcist movies. The only one I saw was the one that came out in like 2021. I saw it with Mallory. She loved the Exorcist movies.
No, I remember. It might not have been the Exorcist. I can't remember, but
there's a lot of. Basically, Judd said he believes that what came back was not Timmy, but a demon that was possessing his corpse. And this is kind of where the catchphrase for the movie shows up. He concludes that sometimes dead is better, and states, the place has power, its own evil purpose. And he thinks that the graveyard itself may have caused Gage's death because Judd had introduced Lewis to the graveyard, basically trying to tempt him into using it to bring his son back.
Yeah, it's the classic Indian burial ground trope. Honestly, it's some parts of this are original, but like, kind of heard this a million times.
Despite Judd's warning and his own reservations, Lewis's grief and guilt spur him to exhume Gage's body from his grave and inter him in the burial ground.
Don't fuck with cursed burial grounds.
Unless magic is somehow discovered and we find out, like, hey, this is known to bring people back, make sure, like, I get cremated or something, Derek, because, like, I don't want to be brought back if someone finds some of this shit.
Man, no, number one, even if we do have magic, number one rule of magic, don't fuck with necromancy.
I was thinking more revival healing magic rather than necromancy.
If you believe some fantasy settings, that's a very blurred line.
It depends on your magic system. Let's not get into implications of different magic systems. Gage returns now malice in both his words and actions, and he finds one of Lewis's scalpels, leading him to kill both Judd and his mother, Rachel.
Oh, God. Don't fuck with cursed burial grounds, man.
In order to stop both Church and Gage, he lethally injects both of them with morphine.
Oh, that's not gonna work.
That was one of the things I hated about the ending of the book and the movie. Like, I feel like you would have to, like, behead it, or, like, you'd have to do more than just, hey, they're basically a resurrected corpse. There shouldn't be enough of, like, the internal machine for that to have worked, but whatever.
Wait, so that was the end of the story?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
We're about to, we're basically get into the cliffhanger of the story. Lewis, ending up being driven insane by his grief, burns down the Crandall house, which is Judge's house, before returning to the burial ground where his wife is buried. He thinks that if he buries her sooner than he did Gage, there'll be a different result.
No, there's not. On what basis?
One of his colleagues, Steve Masterson, notices him walking in the woods with Rachel's body. Steve, while fearful and concerned, is influenced by the power of the burial ground and even considers helping Lewis bury Rachel, but flees in terror and eventually moves to St. Louis. Cut skip. Lewis is sitting alone in his house playing solitaire when Rachel's reanimated corpse walks up behind him and drops a cold hand on his shoulder, rasping, "Darling." Oh, shit. I can tell you where this story came up from.
Okay.
Basically, he was a writer in residence at the University of Maine, according to the Wikipedia article, and they were renting a house in Orrington, Maine, that basically mirrored what happened here, like the truck part. Basically, there was a bunch of pets that got killed by speeding trucks, and his daughter's cat got killed by the truck. He explained it to his daughter and buried the cat. But a couple days later, he imagined what would happen if that had happened, but the cat came back wrong, basically like the Indian burial ground plot.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. That story wasn't as like kitschy to me as like the one about the sentient cars. I don't know. It's like it just kind of like struck me as a little. I don't know. Like, it's still very original, like a very original concept, but it's based on like a trope I've heard before and wasn't really a huge fan of before anyways. Like, I don't know. It's still very creepy, though. It was very, very creepy.
I didn't realize this, but both of the adaptations of the Pet Sematary movies have gotten sequels.
Why? I know why. It's money. Why?
Okay, so same basic plot. They move to Chicago from Chicago to rural Ludlow, Maine, as a local physician instead of like an on-campus person. They befriend Judd. This is for the first movie, the one that was adapted in 89.
Okay.
They befriend Judd, and he takes him to the pet cemetery, and it's very clearly in this movie, like, it's a pet cemetery that, like, the children have made, but it's a like little bit like it's actually like formally like a pet cemetery. It's not just that.
Mm-hmm.
In this movie, instead of being a university student, he's just a jogger who got hit by a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And before he dies, he warns Lewis about the cemetery. And then again that night, he gets the dream.
Right.
Judd takes him off to rebury the cat. So the little particulars like this, the difference is he immediately stinks. Church does when he's reanimated, and he kind of sluggish. Like, basically, it's in this movie, it's more implied they're reanimated, not revived, as the book kind of puts it in.
Mm-hmm.
And his eyes glow gold, and he hates Lewis. Judge then explains, as a boy, he revived his pet. Although the cat might be different, it will save Ellie the grief of losing the pet. Time skip. Gage is killed. Judge anticipates Lewis going to bury his son, although Lewis denies it, and then he basically says, like, hey, tells the story of Timmy, and it gets onto the the ritual ground / like the extra burial ground is like got this like extra like malevolent force basically to once you're introduced to it, you want to keep using it once something's gone.
Yeah, right.
So Judd says again, sometimes dead is better. After the funeral, Rachel and Ellie go to Chicago while Lewis stays, basically to supposedly tie up loose ends, and he ignores both the jogger Pascal and Judd's warnings and exhumes his son's body and buries it. Here's where big changes start coming up. In Chicago, Pascal appears to Ellie in her dream and warns her that Lewis is about to do some fucky shit. He doesn't tell her what he's going to do, but like, oh, he appears to the daughter. I thought it was the mother he appeared to. Basically, Rachel decides to return that night. Gage returns and steals a scalpel from his father's bag. Poor Judd gets murdered, and then Rachel returns, gets lured back into Judd's house by the specter of her dead sister.
What? That's out of left field.
So, okay, there's a subplot that they're not talking about before here, that Rachel had a sister in this movie that, if I'm remembering the flash, it's been so long since I've watched this one. The sister was kind of like emaciated. I think she had like some kind of disease or something and passed away young. I think she had some like guilt/trauma on that. Like maybe she feels like she was responsible or whatever, or maybe she was. I don't remember enough to say for certain. And then because she saw her sister, this is a big name for nerds. Do you know what the sister's name was?
No, shit. I don't know.
What is Robin Williams' daughter's name?
I don't know. I don't know that.
Zelda!
Oh, shit. How was I supposed to know that?
Because it's like a big thing because he named her after Legend of Zelda.
Oh, I had no idea. This is the first time I'm hearing that.
She realizes that she's not actually seeing Zelda, but she's seeing Gage, her son, holding a scalpel. She's shook in disbelief, so she goes to hug her son, and guess what happens?
She gets stabbed, obviously.
Her revived son kills her.
Yeah, so this is literally just beat for beat the plot of the book, but with like some extra nonsense added for no reason.
A lot of Stephen King's books are fairly like, other than a few outliers, the ones that I have seen were actually fairly faithfully adapted, just adding a few nuances here and there. Waking up from his nap, because I don't think he even realizes Gage is awake, but when he went to sleep, Gage had returned. He notices that there's muddy footprints from Gage, and that the scalpel's missing.
Mm-hmm.
He gets a call from Gage saying that he, air quote, played with Judd and Mommy. Lewis grabs his faithful syringes of morphine, 3, and heads to Judd's house. Before entering the house, he encounters Church, where he lethally injects the cat before going in for Gage.
Right.
He finds Judd's body underneath Judd's bed, and Gage taunts him. I forgot this part. That's demented. Lewis is startled by Rachel's hanging body from the attic before Gage attacks him.
Oh, yeah, that was, for a movie adaptation, that's like that'd be like a decent horror.
That's not that much of a stretch for them to add, but so it's lowbrow horror.
Yeah, that's a decent horror. Yeah, it's a decent horror visual for the time.
Yeah. Gage attacks him, brief battle. Because he's an adult, he overpowers Gage, gets him with the morphine. He burns Judd's house to the ground as he carries Rachel's body to the burial grounds. Pascal returns as a ghost and warns Lewis not to make it worse. Lewis is grief-stricken to insanity. Again, believes he waited too long on burying Gage, so if he buries Rachel right away, it will work this time.
Yeah, so they kind of, the big plot point that they changed was they kind of brought Pascal's ghost back as like the ghost of Christmas past.
Pascal kind of had a bigger role. Then another change at the end, it doesn't really change the open-ended ending that's not really open-ended, because you've got to know, Lewis is going to fucking die because whatever. He's insane. That night, Rachel returns to Lewis and they embrace, but she takes a large kitchen knife from the counter and the screen cuts to black.
Yeah, I don't know. This particular one, it doesn't do it for me as well. I guess it's just not as off the wall ridiculous as what was it called? The story about the 2 stories that he wrote about sentient
cars.
Yeah.
Okay, so the movie adaptation for the first one that we covered, and really what started our first tangent for Stephen King, was Maximum Overdrive, based on Trucks, his short story.
Right, yeah.
And then the other one was Carrie, which was a possessed, ghost possessing a car kind of idea.
Yeah, those were fun because they were ridiculous. This one's just kind of
Stephen King's the whole thing's kind of ridiculous, but I think this was like I think Pet Sematary, if I'm remembering, is still one of his earlier works. I think some of his earlier stuff was like more grounded, less ridiculous. I think he leaned into a lot of the ridiculous stuff later on. You ready for the second movie, the second adaptation?
sure. Sure. Is this one like at least like a whole lot different?
So instead of coming from Chicago, they come from Boston. Still Ludlow, still two kids and church.
Now they just have a way worse accent.
Yeah. Instead of Judd introducing them to the cemetery, the kids, the mother and Ellie finds the funeral.
Okay.
The not the funeral, but the local pet cemetery. They what they find is there's like a funeral procession of children talking to a dead dog at the cemetery. I don't think dead is in like revived, just like they go to the grave. Pascal comes back as a student this time, still hit by a truck. He's warned in the dream alone this time, and says not to venture beyond. Basically, don't go to the back part of the cemetery where like the actual ritual ground is. They do the mud on the feet. And the big change here is instead of church passing away on Thanksgiving, they move it up a little bit in the timeline, and he's killed on Halloween.
That's kind of dumb.
Judd, this is where Judd, I really don't like. I forgot this change because I did watch this version too. So Judd, I think it implies Judd had gotten to know the family, but maybe they weren't as friendly in this story. I can't remember as much. They bury church. He returns aggressive, tears a bird apart, but eats it alive.
Well, that's just regular cat behavior.
Yeah, but I think it's implying like the viciousness of it. And most of the time, cats will kill a bird, or they're not gonna like actively eat it while it's still alive. They try and like I've seen most of the time that it's a dead bird. Personally,
Yeah, he didn't even save half of it for his owner. Like, what an asshole.
Here's the big change. They think the burial ground is actually inhabited by a Wendigo.
Oh, that's so fuck you. Fuck you. Who made this? Who's the
This version, do you want the director or
director, writer, producer?
So Matt Greenberg wrote the initial screenplay.
Okay, fuck Matt Greenberg, he's a hack.
Lorenzo de Buenavara and Steven Schneider were producing the film with Juan Carlos Frandillo, I think is the best one, directing it.
Okay, all hacks. That is some hack shit. That is Wendigos are they're so overdone.
No, they didn't stay with that. Duo filmmaker Klosh and Widmer directed it. So yeah, those are who ended up directing it.
Yeah, I hate that.
From what I remember, they're not doing the accurate Wendigo lore. They're doing the skeleton antler thing, not what actual Wendigos are in native lore.
Yeah, like I think that the one thing that is kind of interesting about like the whole Indian burial ground trope is that before it was a trope, it was a sort of shorthand for kind of suggesting that the story that was being told was like an allegory for colonialism. It was like an implication that like whatever curse is befalling these people is a metaphor for like the curse of the evils that colonizers have done to like indigenous peoples that's going to be turned back around to them. That was a kind of like, and
that's what I got. It's also I don't think this is the right area for them to have used a Wendigo, because Wendigo are specifically an Algonquin not mythological, but story / like culture, whatever you want to call that. Like it comes from the Algonquin people, not what I would assume it doesn't say it's still the Micmac people, but I would assume Stephen King used the local natives, so I would hope it was Micmacs are from there.
Yeah, the Algonquins are still pretty close to there though. Like I know that
I thought they were more the Algonquins were more like Louisiana area.
No, they were like kind of the eastern Great Lakes.
Okay, okay,
So they're like the western part of New England,
okay.
and kind of like southeastern like the Great Lakes area of Canada. Is that kind of area? Like they were,
I've watched a lot of Lore Lodge, and I'm just not great at geography on remembering that part of it.
yeah, like the
Because he does, they do a great job explaining like what is actually, he sat down and like talked with natives to decipher, okay, what was actually a Wendigo, what was actually a skinwalker, what was this, like in the actual lore, not what the internet's come up with and all that shit.
yeah, because I know that there were like Mohawk bands, which were part of like the Algonquin, sort of like the Algonquin group. So like the Algonquin cultural group was a bunch of different tribes. I know that the Iroquois were the Iroquois Confederacy was the big one, and the six tribes of the Iroquois were Algonquin. I know that there were also like Algonquins as far north as like Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. Although they were kind of like distantly related, and the Inuit were the big ones up there. But and I can't remember if Inuit.
What I didn't add to that part about the Wendigo earlier is it kind of like in the movie it implies that there is like they use the antler skull thing creature, and they kind of use it as like a specter, like where the cast can't really see it, but like it pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Church ends up attacking Gage, and he starts to go to euthanize Church, saying sometimes dead is better. So like Lewis takes that phrase rather than Judd. So Judd's part is severely diminished in this one, but instead of killing the cat, he decides to just set him free in the wild. Feral zombie cat, much not a good idea. You want to know what's gonna hit you in your heart worse than that? Being a stupid idea.
Did he at least neuter the zombie cat first?
I think it's implied that it's basically dead, so I don't think it's reproductive would have worked.
Well, we don't know that. He didn't know that.
What I've seen in the movie, it doesn't feel like it was like, I think it was like so zombie slash feral to the point where I think it's kill, doesn't care about breeding. Like I don't think that part of its brain was still there.
Yeah, the fucking clip of Steve Harvey just pointing up at the thing, and it's just like
Kill! I fucking love that clip. So here comes a big change. During her birthday party, Ellie spots Church on the road and excitedly rushes to him, but gets hit and killed by a derailed tanker truck. So instead of Gage dying, it's Ellie.
So it's kind of leaning into like the thing, like the Sematary is kind of trying to lure people back in.
Yes, I feel like the second adaptation really put, like, I think that's why they had it manifest as a Wendigo, or what they thought a Wendigo was. I think they wanted to personify it and like put more emphasis on this is actually like trying to draw in more people and like harm lives. The family is devastated. Rachel and Gage leave to spend time with Rachel's parents. Sensing that Lewis is gonna bring back Ellie, Judd warns him against it, saying she wouldn't be the same. And Victor also warns him, the spirit. Like, so again, they kind of bring Victor back a little bit more, because in the book, I think he only shows up in the dream, right? If I'm remembering, yeah. His grief makes him go ahead. He ends up drugging Judd, exhuming Ellie's corpse, and buries her in the graveyard as the Wendigo looks on. That's what I was getting at, is like, I don't think they really talked about it like in the book where they could see the Wendigo. I think they used, like I said, as like a personification. Ellie returns from the dead but has a disturbing demeanor. And here's where they really talk more about, you get to know a little bit more about Zelda in this version of the story, at least in this summary. Rachel is visited by visions of her dead sister Zelda. In this version, she had spinal meningitis and passed away after falling down a dumbwaiter shaft.
Okay.
Gage is frightened by the ghost of Victor, who tries to warn him. So they kind of like switch Ellie and Gage's roles, at least in like the
from like movie to movie.
Yeah, on this one. Judd wakes up and spots Ellie in the house. He flees home in horror to retrieve. Basically, he's like sees Ellie's in the other house and goes to get his gun, but gets distracted by Church and Ellie's. Oh, he wasn't outside. He was inside the house. Okay, so Judd wakes up. So Lewis drugs Judd in the house, and when Judd wakes up, he's trying to go get his gun because he sees Ellie, but Church and Ellie, Church distracts him and Ellie cuts his Achilles tendon.
Oh, shoot. Had to add some fight scenes into this, of course.
And taunts him with the voice of his dead wife before viciously stabbing him to death. In the first movie, the most of the kills were like quick. This really leans into the horror aspect, with like the gruesome kills on the second one.
Right.
Rachel and Gage return home and encounter the undead Ellie. Rachel is horrified and flees with Gage to an upstairs bedroom. Ellie, enraged by being rejected by her mother, attacks Rachel as Lewis finds Judd's dead body. Rushing home, Lewis manages to save Gage as Ellie fatally stabs Rachel. He locks Gage in the car, and Rachel begs her husband not to bury her in the cemetery. Ellie knocks Lewis unconscious and drags her mother to the burial ground. So that's another change right there. Instead of it being like stricken with grief, it's really it's sending home on the burial ground being possessed.
Yeah.
And so they revive. Ellie revives Rachel.
Honestly, I think the grief works better thematically.
I think yes, thematically, it's intentionally continuing the cycle feels more thematically correct because that's kind of what started it. Ellie and Rachel, okay, at the cemetery, Ellie tries to kill Lewis. Lewis tries to decapitate Ellie, but is impaled from behind, showing Rachel has returned. Ellie and Rachel silently drag Lewis away where he is buried. So they bring him back and they set fire to Judge's house before approaching the car, and they like basically approach the car where Gage is at, and assumingly cuts to black again, where basically implies Gage is going to meet the same fate.
It suffers from and this was when was this one released?
So this one was 2019.
Yeah, it suffers from like the modern movie adaptation sin of like throwing out all of like the thematic stuff for like shock and spectacle. Like, because like thematically in like the original book, and to a greater extent in the movie, or in the 89 movie, it was like the concept of like the cemetery, the cursed cemetery, was fed with like grief and like the with like you said, a cycle of grief leading people to make bad decisions, resulting in causing more grief, which just continues the cycle.
I like where it's more implied that that yes, there could be something there malevolent at the burial place, but I like it more putting like maybe the place is like demented, yeah, because it brings them back wrong, but it doesn't need to do anything to get its prey. I like that more. Like because that plays into our human hubris.
Yeah, and I think with that newer movie, it like the cemetery could have been literally just any monster. It could have just been a generic monster, and it wouldn't have changed the plot.
I feel like in I would have liked it better if they would have went like just had it personified as a Native American, just dressed up as older and just like maybe like a bloody or whatever warband chief leader or whatever, rather than trying to go a Wendigo part, because it just again it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, like throwing the Wendigo into it.
Yeah, it just seemed really
like. I feel like yes, making it possessed, like having like the way they narratively changed it, where like the graveyard is actively fighting for more people. I don't agree with it because it doesn't match thematically, but I don't think it's as big a sin as personifying that as a Wendigo, a fake Wendigo, but still.
Yeah, it's just playing into like, because the Wendigo is like the most recent of like the scary. The scary myths.
Yeah. Are you ready for our 40 lore?
Yeah, I think. Okay, I think I want to tell you about the Chaos Gods, actually. Well, okay, I don't know. Yeah, I'll tell you about the Chaos Gods because they're like one of the big important like world building things you need to kind of understand before you get the full setting. So, okay, so where do I start?
In the beginning.
Yeah, well, I already did in the beginning. We're moving past Genesis. We're getting into like Exodus and Deuteronomy now.
I fucking hate, one, that I got that reference, but two, that we had to go for a biblical reference.
So during the War in Heaven, there was this. I told you about the warp.
Yes.
Right. It was like it's the Sea of Souls. It's this parallel dimension where all of the psychic energy and the soul energy of sentient beings within our our material realm go and kind of become manifest. So all of our thoughts and emotions and our whatever goes through like our connection to the warp, it and during this 5 million year long war that where like entire stars were destroyed and all of the planets surrounding it on like a whim, there was so much of like very specific emotions that were just shot into the warp that it caused basically the warp to turn into like a storm, and it caused like a lot of turbulence. And some of these ideas ended up kind of like congealing together and then manifesting into like their own sentient beings within the warp. And then they just kept getting fed more and more and more until they turned into like these godlike entities. And so during that time, 3 specifically were created. And one of them was Khorne, 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 who is the god of murder. And he's often referred. Have you ever heard the term "blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne"?
I thought that was just a meme, like saying.
Yeah, it's a meme that it's one of the only big pieces of 40K lore that have made it outside of the 40K community, and it's specifically referring to Khorne, who's the god of blood and war and murder, and that's something that his followers kind of say. That's like their battle cry: blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Khorne, he is a manifestation of all of the hatred and the bloodlust and the all of the emotions associated with violence that kind of manifested during the war in heaven.
Okay.
And he's often like he's depicted as like he looks more like your stereotypical Satan. Like he's like this big buff guy in like this really intricate black and brass armor who sits on a throne made of skulls, and his realm is just eternally covered in fire with like rivers and waterfalls of blood just everywhere. And the way that you worship Khorne, if you are so inclined, is to kill.
Well, I would assume.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who you kill, as long as you're killing. Khorne does not care from whence the blood flows so much as it flows. And so, and there's a common thing you're going to see with the powers of chaos a lot in this setting is that they're not black and white evil. They're the main antagonists of the setting, more or less, but they're very complicated because they are a manifestation of all of the of all of the emotions that sentient beings have.
Yeah, it's like when I say humanity, I mean like sentient beings, like humanity. Like we're a complicated race, and you can't describe all of our desires and wants as good, but we have them, so that doesn't make us all bad. So we can't say all death in the war are bad, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Khorne isn't just the god of murder and bloodshed. He's also the god of like the god of honor and the god of faithfulness and the god of brotherhood and all of that stuff that's kind of associated with war as well. He's also like the god of fairness.
Like the camaraderie part and stuff.
Yeah. So he's also the god of fairness. Out of all of the chaos gods, Khorne is the only one who's guaranteed if you follow him and you do your job and you spill blood for him, he's never going to betray you.
That's like, from what I've heard about Warhammer, that'd probably be the only god I would like kind of pledge loyalty if I was going to pledge loyalty to a god, because like pledge loyalty to a god in Warhammer feels like it's like a catch-22, like you can get burned by it hard.
Oh, 100%. This is a setting where there are not only gods, but all of those gods hate you specifically.
Yeah.
And Khorne he's the most consistent. You're not gonna get any surprises out of him. You get exactly what's on the box. You kill, you spill blood, and you take skulls and sacrifice to him, and he'll give you power. And that's as simple as it is. You fail him in any way, he takes that power away, and usually that involves also killing you in the process. He's probably my favorite Chaos God, mostly because my favorite Chaos faction are the World Eaters, which are we'll talk about them later, but they're Space Marines. You've probably heard of Space Marines.
Yep.
There are Space Marines that like.
One day you need to explain the salamanders to me because I saw like a little comic about them.
Yeah, the salamanders are fun because they're the only faction in the Imperium that actually care about human lives.
Yeah, that's. I think I saw like a little. I saw a little comic where it was like a salamander shows up and like, here's a little doll for you. Everything's gonna be okay. And then it cuts away and like, hey, the Space Marines are here, but it's actually bad ones and they kill the family and it fucks with the salamander.
Yeah, probably either like the Grey Knights or the Templars or like the Marines Malevolent or something like that. Yeah,
I don't think it shows the faction of the Marines who do the killing, but I could be wrong. It was also like I barely got to see that because it was like cut up on face. You know how sometimes Facebook has impartial like comic panels and shit. That's where I found it.
yeah. So one of my favorite Chaos faction are the World Eaters, who are Space Marines that devoted themselves to Khorne, and they're all just like bloodthirsty berserkers. But their whole arc, like the whole arc of their story, is just a metaphor for like fatherly abandonment and like the cycle of abuse. And I think it's really well written and a lot of fun. But I also just think Khorne is the neatest of the Chaos Gods.
Dope.
And then the second god that was formed out of a war in heaven was, I think the next one was Tzeentch. I think he was second. So I think the second one that was formed was Tzeentch. That's Tzeench. Tzeentch. And Tzeentch is he's another really cool one. He is referred to as the architect of fate and the changer of ways because he is the god of change. He is the god of evolution, like things turning into other things, basically. But more oftenly, he kind of manifests as, he's also referred to as the Lord of Plots and Schemes because he is basically like Khorne.
They're Loki.
Kind of more malicious than Loki, honestly. Like,
Damn, I thought Loki was already malicious.
the way that you worship Tzeentch is by plotting and scheming. So, like, coming up with a plan that benefits yourself personally, carrying through with it. And usually the form that takes is going to be like courtroom or like court intrigue, political intrigue, assassinations, stuff like that. And he's kind of the patron of that. You go to him for power with like luck and planning and things like. He's really kind of he's really esoteric. He's really hard to explain. And that's kind of in his nature. He is the god of the unexplainable, and he himself, Tzeentch, personally has plans that are like millions of years in the making. Like, he will be planning stuff and kind of setting the stage for things to happen like millions of years in advance. And so his his plots and his schemes are kind of like the main driving force for change and evolution within the setting. Like, anytime anyone plans any sort of plot, or even just like planning a campaign or like a military campaign, or just anything like you kind of get the vibe.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. He is also the god of magic, the god of sorcery. So in the setting, there are these types of people called psychers. And psychers are basically just wizards, but with like a sort of pseudo-sciencey spin. They're people that can harness the power of the warp through their minds and use them to cast basically like spells in the real world. And they're basically like the mages and the magicians of the setting. And because the warp is so fucked up, they're also nearly always like schizophrenic as well, like constantly hearing voices and stuff.
Of course.
And it's extremely dangerous and difficult to be a psyker. But if you want to do it as relatively safely as you possibly can, you become a patron of, or you you become you make Tzeentch your patron. You worship Tzeentch, and he may bestow boons on you that will allow you to better control your powers and your spells and things like that. Or he might not. He might just blow your brain up. He might just cause your head to explode. He's done that too. Who knows? He's completely random. Nobody knows what he's trying to do. This is the Chaos God that if you worship him, you're the most likely to be stabbed in the back by him. Because he's just got plans upon schemes, upon ideas, upon other plans, just all the way down, just for forever. But like I said, all of the Chaos Gods kind of have their positive side as well, because they're very complicated. He is also the god of hope, because scheming and plotting doesn't necessarily have to be like malicious or evil. Somebody who is planning a revolution, like somebody who's planning on overthrowing their oppressors so that they can, in the hope that they will have a better life, they are inadvertently worshiping Tzeentch when they do that. So that's kind of his positive aspect. And then the third Chaos God who is made is this. Buckle up, this one's really gross. The third one was Nurgle. And Nurgle is the god of disease and decay and entropy. But more abstractly, he's the god of dread over death. Like he was formed from the emotions of people fearing for their lives and dreading what comes after, knowing that they're going to die soon. A lot of people, if you ask who you would want to be, like if you had to worship a Chaos God, who would you worship? A lot of people in the 40K community will say Nurgle, because he is the nicest of the Chaos Gods. Like his followers are always happy, and he is probably the kind Nurgle loves you. Grandfather Nurgle loves you. He's referred to by his followers as the grandfather, because that's what he is to his followers. He's not like an all overbearing, all powerful like Old Testament god. He's like sitting you on his knee and giving you treats and telling you like grandfatherly advice about life and stuff like that. The only issue is the treats that he's giving you are diseases, and that's how they view it. To them, disease and entropy and decay are all, and ultimately just death itself, are all an inevitable state of everything in the universe. Everything in the universe eventually rots away and goes back to nothing. And that is terrifying, but Nurgle offers you an alternative. And Nurgle says, this isn't something that you need to fear, this is something that you need to embrace. Because death is how you create life. You need to die and decay and go back into the universe in order for new life to come about. And so in that way, you never truly die. And that's why his followers are so happy, because they have transcended death. They do not fear death, and they do not fear pain, because they know that they are constant and they are eternal, and that they will never change or be different. They will always be the same.
Interesting.
And so that's the weird thing about Nurgle. He has his positive aspects as well, but he kind of wears them on his sleeve. And it makes for some really interesting like writing, because in a lot of the books where you're looking at like different conflicts where like some space marines are fighting Nurgle demons or something like that. All of these Chaos Gods, they have their own like armies in the warp. They're called demons, but they're spelled Daemon. You know, to be distinct and unique. Games Workshop really likes copywriting stuff. Yeah,
of course.
And Nurgle's demons, when they go into battle, they're all like chanting and singing, and they're like having a great time, and like it's like a big party to them, because to them it's not really like going into to fight a battle. It's more like they're going out to like spread the great, wonderful gifts of Grandfather Nurgle.
Ah, fun.
Yeah, and the most recent ones, the most recent story where they featured the Nurgle factions really heavily was the most recent Dark Imperium books, and the descriptions of the battlefields in that in that book were just horrific. It was genuinely disgusting, and it was so gross, and it contrasted really hard with like when it on one side you'll have like the Imperial Guard or the Space Marines that are like looking at like these shambling zombies with like their guts spilling out of them, and they're just hobbling towards them through the mist, and they're all like terrified. And then it shifts to the perspective of like all of these Nurgle demons and like the Poxwalkers and stuff, and they're all just kind of like singing, and they're all like joking around, and they're like so Nurgle has like these smaller demons called Nurglings, that are just like these fat little guys that are like 3 feet tall, and they're just kind of like jumping around from like artillery blast craters in No Man's Land, jumping back and forth between them, just kind of like swimming and like playing and splashing each other and stuff.
It's creepy as fuck.
It's so gross, but they're all so happy. Like, if nothing else, when you start worshiping Nurgle, you're never going to be sad again.
Fair.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the three that were formed during the War in Heaven. But then there's a fourth one that came about later,
Okay.
and this is the most controversial one. So after the War in Heaven, the Necrons went to sleep. Like they locked themselves up in their tomb worlds, and they went to sleep with the intention of like millions of years down the line, when all of these other races were dead and gone, they could wake back up and retake the galaxy. And so with them gone now, the most powerful race left was one of the races that was created by the old ones to fight the Necrons, which was the Eldari, which are basically like space elves.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so they went out and they basically took control of the entire galaxy, and then that was it. They were all that was left. They were the most powerful and the most dominant, and nobody could challenge them. And so they basically had like complete hegemonic power over the entire galaxy for like 60 million years.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And they advanced so far technologically, and also they were all psychers. They were all really powerful psychers. But their technology and their psychic power advanced so far that they basically became the old ones. They became functionally immortal. Their technology was unmatched. They reached the pinnacle of what it means to be a sentient being.
Damn.
And then they weren't able to do anything else. There was nowhere left to go. They'd reached the top. And so then they became bored. And so now that there was no challenge, or no new challenges to face, or no new mountains to climb, basically they just decided to dedicate their lives to finding increasingly more intense ways to experience new feelings and emotions. Because that was their last frontier, was their own emotions.
Okay.
And so it started out as like artistic work. And so like they got really into art, but then eventually that kind of like the appeal of that kind of wore off. So then they tried sex.
And that wore off.
Yeah, and then that wore off. And then they tried drugs.
And that wore off.
And then that wore off. And then they tried hurting themselves.
And that gave them jingled their bells.
Yeah, but that wore off too.
I thought that was where they were going to stay. They were like the psychos, like self-mutilation.
No, it never ends. So they start with self-mutilation, and then they get bored with that, so they start mutilating other people. And then they start mixing all of this sadism and masochism with art. And they start mixing it with sex. And they start mixing it with drugs. And then they start mixing it...
And they start mixing everything with everything.
They start mixing it all together until you have like public executions mixed with orgies and stuff like that are just commonplace throughout their entire galactic empire. And they're just trying to find more and more intense forms of sensation. Because eventually they get desensitized and they have to find even more extreme ways of doing that. And it gets more and more depraved and more violent, and it keeps going like just faster and faster and faster and faster until eventually they've pumped so much of these new sensations into the warp.
That it's corrupted the warp itself?
The warp is already corrupted, but what they're specifically doing here is all of these feelings and emotions that they're doing, pumping into the warp over 60 million years, it explodes, rips a tear in the fabric of reality, just a giant blight on the face of the galaxy. And this tear in reality, which comes to be called the Eye of Terror, births a new chaos god. And the god that emerges from it is Slaanesh, the god of excess.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, also referred to as the Prince of Pleasure. And when Slaanesh is birthed, the resulting psychic explosion that reverberates throughout the galaxy instantly kills 90% of the entire Eldar race.
Fuck.
And so the only ones that survive, one group that survives are the ones that saw like bad things happening because of all of this stuff that their civilization was doing, and they escaped on these continent-sized spaceships called craft worlds. And then the other ones that survived were the ones that were in the webway, which the webway is like this subspace tunnel that the Eldars used, or that the old ones used to get around, that the Eldars were still using. The webway had like a whole city inside of it of like the most depraved of all of the Eldar. That's where they went to do like their stuff. And so any of them that were in the webway when the Eye of Terror opened and Slaanesh was born, they all survived as well.
Okay.
And they became the Drukhari, or the Dark Eldar. But this isn't an Eldar story. This is a Chaos God story. And so the fourth Chaos God, Slaanesh, she is the god of excess, the Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Sensation, stuff like that.
You used female pronouns, but used prince.
Yeah, she's usually referred to with she, her pronouns within the setting, but she is usually presented, at least by the better writer, she's usually presented as androgynous.
Okay.
It kind of, and keep in mind, all of these gods, none of them really have physical forms. They're whatever like physical manifestation they take isn't a true reflection of what they actually are, because they're inconceivable to a mortal mind. So none of them really have gender, but Slaanesh specifically really has some confused gender, even though they don't really have gender.
Narratively speaking, not lore speaking.
Right, yeah. But yeah, so she is now like, she is like the god of, like, the way that you worship Slaanesh is through things like sadism, or self-harm, or heavy drug use, or one of my favorites, her Space Marine Legion that worships her. They're called the Emperor's Children, which is really ironic. But they have these units in the Emperor's Children called Noise Marines, and they seek to embody the perfection of Slaanesh through the sensation of sound. And they have sonic weaponry that is so loud that be a direct hit from one of their sonic weapons can just cause your brain to turn into jelly. Like, it just shakes your body apart. And even to a lot of them, like, a lot of the Noise Marines really regret becoming Noise Marines, because even now, like, the loud noises that they create that they use as like these super powerful weapons, they've become numb to. They can't experience it anymore.
Damn.
Yeah, so that's the downside of Slaanesh, is that you are constantly craving more and more and more. You can never be satisfied, because if you are satisfied, that's displeasing to Slaanesh. And so you constantly have to be dragging more and more sensation from any source you can get.
It's like having a high. You always have to chase that new high.
Yeah, and so all of Slaanesh's followers are kind of like, they're kind of demented. Like they love pain. They love destroying themselves. They love other people's pain and destruction. They have no sense of self-preservation. If the sensation of death is something that they deeply craved, they would just take it and they wouldn't think twice about it, even if it means like they'll never be able to. Even if it means their own death, like that is a sensation that they crave. They need to have it right now. I can't live a single second more without it. I need it.
Fuck.
Yeah, it gets really dark. Slanesh is a surprisingly dark one of the. Yeah, that's. Oh yeah, also Slanesh, just like all of the other gods, she has her upsides too.
Okay.
So like, she's not just the god of like sensations like pain or violence or anything like that. She's also the god of. She's the god of every sensation. So that includes things like joy, or pride, or like just the way that I've heard it described is that you can worship Slanesh either by enjoying the squeals of your victim as you rip their fingernails out, or by just enjoying the feeling of like a nice breeze and the scent of flowers in your nose. Both of those please Slanesh, because both of those are sensations.
Dang.
So so those are the four chaos gods, and you need to understand like they are kind of like the main antagonist, more or less. It's a lot more complicated than that. There are no good guys in 40K, but they're kind of presented as like the main antagonists. So yeah. Next time I'll tell you about how humanity got to where they are.
There's I knew I would enjoy like Warhammer, maybe not like hey, this sounds like a fun thing, like universe to be in, but just like this deep lore is just like amazing. Where can they find you on social media, Derek?
They can find me at Visigoth. The first I is a 1, the O is a 0. They can find me on Blue Sky. The first I is an I, the O is a 0. Tim, give them all the stuff.
So they can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Tim, aka Otis, and they can find the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at the Alexander Society Pod, Alex Society Pod on Twitter and Blue Sky, and Alexander Society on TikTok. We hope you enjoyed us today, and if you did, please give us a rate and review on your streaming platform of choice. We'll see you next time.
Bye.